Welcome to On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Gerry Hamilton and CJ Vogel of On Texas Football. This episode of State of the Program brought to you by our friend Adam Loewy over at the Loewy Law Firm. CJ and Gerry, for today's State of the Program, I want to ask you guys about major themes that we're seeing come through right now. We're, almost 2 weeks to the day from when practice started. We're 17 days away from the first game against Colorado State. What are some major themes that you're looking at that you feel Texas has got to, they're either latching onto or got to figure out, to be honest, in the next 17 days? CJ, I'll start with you, buddy. What's one for you that you're thinking of right now?
Yeah, it remains versatility across the board, right? We could talk about defensively or offensively and probably have a nice 10-minute segment on either side of the ball, Bobby. I really liked what I heard from Jahdae Barron last night in his player availability. He said, yeah, Sarkisian recruits a heck of an athlete. And as a result, whenever they come to Austin and whenever they join this program, they have plenty of different avenues and doors that they could open to become contributors for this football team. Jahdae mentioned 6 guys right now in that secondary are getting looks at 2 to 3 different positions right now, whether that be cross-training at nickelback or cornerback. We obviously know Jahdae's been getting a look at everywhere in the secondary at the moment. Jalen Gilbo, another guy who was mentioned as getting looks outside as well. But then you start looking beyond that, guys like Warren Roberson or Kobe Black or World Delmack, some guys that are a little bit younger, still getting extra looks. Offensively, obviously, a little bit more out of necessity, it's the versatility of a Ryan Niblett or Juan Davis that allows them to then hop into the running back room, as we reported late last night, Bobby, and get a look at that position because Texas needs bodies there. It's no longer stepping on campus and I'm only a wide receiver. I'm only a tight end. These guys are great athletes, and Sarkisian and his staff, especially in the offseason, have allowed these guys to explore a little bit more out of their athleticism. And as a result, I think it's going to add to the depth, which we already believe is, very deep at Texas. But again, that versatility then allows for more schematic playbook opportunities as well on Saturdays.
I've got to say, versatility is another piece, CJ, that comes to mind when you talk about the receiver group. Gerry and I talked about this yesterday. It's not just that kind of versatility where they're cross-training. It's the fact that 5 of your 6 receivers can play any receiver spot.
Absolutely.
It's the fact that you have Amari Niblack that can play in the slot or even outside like they're apparently using him. You mentioned Juan Davis and his time at running back now, getting a look at least there for the time being. And then also Gunnar Helm is a kind of well-rounded tight end, right? So there's on both sides. You also look at a guy like Mo Blackwell, who brings a lot of versatility to the defense. Can be a pass rusher as well as drop into coverage. Guys like Trey Moore, Colin Simmons, that versatility all brings some value to a value proposition. Gerry, what about you? What are some of the themes or a theme that you think is worth focusing on today?
Well, headed into this season, the talk was Texas offensive line. Could this be the best offensive line in the country? I think Georgia is. Could they be up for the Joe Moore Award? The offensive line's performance this year has never been more important than it is now. Because does Cedric Baxter kill your season? No. Does Cedric Baxter change the calculus of your season? Yeah. So there's never been more of an importance for this offensive line to have a really good season than now. 2 running back injuries into it. One of those your starter and your best all-around back that maybe could help Sarkisian's entire offense go in a weird way. Now this offensive line has more pressure on them to pass pro. You lost your best pass pro running back, changes the calculus a little bit. Right side is not very game experienced, but is very talented. The starters, Quinn Ewers' protection is now more important because I'm not sure Texas is going to have the same play-action game, be able to execute the same play-action game as prior to Cedric Baxter's injury. So the offensive line is going to have a huge season for Texas for them to achieve their goals. And this is the year the fans have kind of been waiting on, is that 2022 class is all grown up physically. They've been in the program This will be year 3 for all these guys. So offensive line is my big theme right now. They're going to have a really good season for Texas. No one injury doesn't derail a season, but one significant injury can change the way you were going to attack the season and try to maximize the season. So that is what happened with Cedric Baxter's injury. And so now the offensive line, there's a little more pressure on them than ever to perform at the highest level possible, because I do think Texas is going to throw the football more now than they were. And that means you're going to have to protect Quinn more than maybe was the original plan headed into fall camp.
I love it. I mean, I think those are really 2 astute comments from you guys. I mean, the versatility and depth that CJ mentioned speaks to really the recruiting and player development, as well as just talent attraction, right, and retention that Texas has done. And we've chronicled that, and it's true. And it's coming, those things are coming home to roost. Gerry, yours is very prescient, because I think you look at the focus on the offensive line and just how much things have changed. I had 2 things down that I really and I've talked about it on Texas Football as well as our video channel. I think it's going to be more of a QB-focused offense because it's Quinn's 3rd year. That was already heading in that direction. Now it's magnified.
Yeah.
And so your point, Gerry, what matters most there? Well, protecting him does. And so the focus on the offensive line in your comments becomes even greater. So my QB-driven offense comment kind of dovetails with what you were thinking about as it relates to the offensive line. So I completely agree. And they're going to try to find new ways to protect Quinn, too, by moving Juan Davis into the backfield in particular, maybe.
And when they do that, by the way, guys, when they do that, that's a tip. That takes away your versatility on offense. So you're an easier team to, all right, blitz, get the ball out, let's get through this guy and get the ball out of his hand quickly, because you're not worried about them hitting you with a run play. So that is one of the major changes there for me is it's going to cause Sark to tip his hand a little more this season than obviously you want to do prior to injuries happen. So that offensive line, much bigger task in front of them now.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing that I talked about, and this also plays into versatility a little bit, it was, and Sark mentioned this in Monday's press conference, CJ and Gerry. He talked about opportunism on the defense. Like he was very happy with it on Saturday. Coming out of that scrimmage is when I started hearing people say, hey, we might be able to take the ball away a little bit more. And then on Monday afternoon, he came back, or Monday evening, he came back and said the same thing again. Said also in that scrimmage, he felt like, look, we're starting to take the ball away a little bit more than we're used to around here. So what does that mean? I mean, well, pass rush,
yes,
obviously, and you start getting some opportunistic players on the field, guys like Anthony Hill, Derek Williams, Jahdae Barron, maybe Trey Moore, Colin Simmons, that have a nose for the football and making big plays. I think that kind of sits there with me, is that opportunism on defense might be a crucial role, because look, we can say that they're gaining confidence in the defensive front, and Steve Sarkisian is saying that. He feels like, look, I think I'm growing in confidence there, but he can say that, Gerry and CJ, yet not be all of what he needs to be a good defense this year. If they can take the ball away at a higher rate and create more negative plays or big negative plays of an offense, they can get themselves in better situations where teams are going to have a hard time just running it down their throat.
What creates turnovers is, I don't want to go Shaka Smart use this term, havoc and chaos. That's what causes turnovers. Bend but don't break doesn't create turnovers unless somebody makes a mistake on their end. And I think what Steve Sarkisian's hitting on, CJ, he thinks they can force that this year with pass rush, with what Johnny Nanson's bringing to the secondary in terms of disguise, different types of things within the scheme. But I think you create that with havoc and chaos, and the defenses that can do that. And there's different ways to do that, but it starts with pass rush. It starts with your front. But if you can do that, then that tied in with a good plan in your secondary to make the most of those opportunities. I think that's where Sark's getting at, guys.
Yeah, I was going to say, look back at the two big ball games that Texas won a year ago against ranked opponents, right? I know that later on in the season, they really started to find their groove, but Kansas State at home with a backup quarterback and Alabama on the road. What was it about that game that was basically the storyline? It was turnovers. Texas was able to jump in front of two passes from Jalen Milroe and basically turn the tide in that game. It was Jahdae Barron very early where he, I think that was more film study than anything. He saw him hit his back foot, saw the route, and he jumped in front of it. It was a very impressive zone scheme read there from Jahdae to get that interception. The other one was Jaron Thompson, who was more on an island, read the eyes, and came back to pick off a deep curl route. Both of those are being opportunistic, knowing your personnel, knowing what's in front of them against Kansas State. It's more that havoc pass rush, right? It was Ethan Burke who comes around, gets the big swing and strip sack there, and Texas punches it in from the 3-yard line after an overturn. And what do you know? You got 7 more points on the board, whereas that same type of pressure up front allowed for Texas to, one, fumble and throw an interception a bit errantly, right, in their own zone, which allowed for the Kansas State comeback. So that's where I look at and say, yeah, if you can control that turnover margin, and it's coach speak, you'd love to do so, right? It's one of those goals you'll see on the whiteboard in every locker room before a game starts. But if you do so because of that pass rush up front, as Gerry was mentioning, it makes the job in the secondary a whole lot easier and limits you from those big explosive plays that you could allow, like we saw against at times Houston and TCU.
Before we go to the next topic, which is going to be the Michigan game, I want to say thank you to our sponsor. That's Adam Loewy, sponsors each and every state of the program here at On Texas Football. Adam and his firm have been helping injured Texans for more than 2 decades and been really good results for their clients. If you think you may be due compensation because of a truck wreck, car wreck, automobile accident of any kind, including motorcycles and ATV, give Adam and his firm a chance to earn your business. Ask for a free consultation. All you have to do is go to loeweylawfirm.com and get a free consultation. They'll tell you what they think of your particular case, and y'all can go from there. Again, no strings attached with Adam and his law firm. Hey, Gerry and CJ, the next piece that I want to talk about with you guys is the situation, so to speak, at Michigan. This is a eerily comparable game to Texas going on the road a year ago, second game of the year, against Alabama, right? And we both know that Alabama was favored in that game. Michigan is favored right now, actually, against Texas. But Michigan is the defending national champion, right? What are y'all thinking about that game from a comparison standpoint? I mean, it's very odd. Both years, Texas goes on the road against a highly, highly ranked opponent. And 2 of the biggest and best programs of all time in college football, marquee programs. Y'all have any comparisons about how you feel Texas sits right now versus a year ago? I want to say this. I feel there's less certitude about what this Texas team is going to be this year compared to a year ago, where so many of those guys from last year, we knew who they were and what they're going to be. Now you've got new faces at wide receiver, for example. You got guys like Trey Moore and Andrew Makuba, who we think are going to be real players for them on defense. The comparison is hard, but it's proper. My only piece is right now I feel like there's less certitude around Texas this year than last year going into play. Some hard-nosed teams with new quarterbacks, both of them.
Yeah. What's interesting? What's interesting to me, Bobby, is both teams. Nick had new coordinators last year, right? So new coordinators at Michigan. There's a big difference. Obviously, there's one glaring difference. Alabama wasn't in chaos when that game was played. Michigan's in chaos, but they actually, the more I think about it, I wondered, okay, how's this going to affect those guys coming back on the team? They played they lived through chaos last year and won a national championship. But it's so interesting. Alex Orji, I was at Saxe High yesterday, and I talked to Red Barons, the head coach there, the head coach of Devin Duvernay, now Khalil Lockett, and a number of former college and NFL players. And I asked him about Alex Orji because Orji, his brothers played at Rockwall High. They moved over to Saxe. And I asked him about Alex Orji. I said, look, what was he like when you had him? What's he like now? And he said, Gerry, he had no idea what to do with the football. He had no idea where the football was going. He just had a really strong arm, and he was tough to tackle, and he was a good leader, and he was smart. I mean, does that sound familiar? I mean, he's not the athlete Jalen Milroe is, okay? Not many people are, but there's a lot of similarities there. Alex Orji, CJ, is going to be starting his second game, like Jalen Milroe was, with a new coordinator in a new system. Now, Michigan's system will be very run heavy, very RPO. They're going to really, I think maybe more so than Alabama even did, lean on their physicality against Texas defense. I mean, they're just going to lean on it and say, if you can come up here and you can beat us with physicality, then we'll shake your hand. But they're truly going to make Texas do that. And I'm not sure Alabama truly – now Alabama's a physical team, but I'm not sure that was truly the game plan for them. I think that's the game plan for Michigan this year. I think the other interesting thing with that is, look, Texas had more experience in Sark's scheme last year at wide receiver and tight end. They will be a little more green this year at wide receiver and tight end. The flip side, I'll say this, as Alabama has a lot of talented defensive players, I think Michigan's defensive team this year is more talented than Alabama's last year.
They definitely are at defensive tackle, and one of the corners is going to be a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, CJ? What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, that physicality that we look at and know of Michigan, right? What was it? 20 straight runs, 25, 26 straight runs against Penn State to close that game out, even with a first-round quarterback, right? We saw it in the national championship against Washington, where it felt like Donovan Edwards was going to hit 500 rushing yards in that first quarter, right? But beyond that, I look at that offensive line, and going from left to right, you got a senior transfer, you got a grad transfer, you got a redshirt junior, you got a redshirt sophomore, and another redshirt junior. So you got a lot of experience there. It's in that same kind of category that we're putting at Gerry. That 2022 class for Texas, they're grown up now. We're excited to see what they can do as, some of the old guys on this roster. Michigan's replacing that entire offensive line, but they're doing it with a lot of experience, a lot of depth, a lot of guys that have been in that same system and program for quite some time now. And so similar to what we talked about with Texas a year ago, maybe having some guys that have been around in Sark's system and know what it's like to see a 3rd and 7 and know the play call and know exactly where to be, that offensive line will be in that similar situation. Of course, they also had a few guys step in because of injury a year ago, so they're not completely green and inexperienced with that offensive line despite starting for the first time. What's going to be interesting to me is what's the quarterback dynamic with Michigan? You talked about it a little bit with Alex Orji, a great athlete, waiting on the arm to catch up with what is, otherwise a really impressive guy with the ball in his hands. That was a bit of a question mark after the spring game. If you go back and you watch that, he wasn't able to hit many guys in stride. I don't think Michigan ran many crossers or slants or ins or digs or guys where they're moving, parallel to the line of scrimmage. It's more vertical and it's more stops and curls. What did Texas do very well with stops and curls? Well, I already mentioned it with Jalen Milroe. They jumped in front of those. They were opportunistic in that aspect as well. So whether or not it's Alex Orji or Jack Tuttle, who's, going on year 6 in college football and hasn't really scratched the surface of being a guy that's a formidable guy, or Davis Warren, there's still some question marks with that Michigan quarterback situation, to which, again, if Texas and Steve Sarkisian, who we know likes to throw the ball very early in ball games, especially in that first quarter, right? I charted it. All those opening drives, 76% of their passing plays 76% of those plays on the opening drives of games in 2023 were pass attempts. If Texas is able to continue that aggressive downfield approach and score via the air early on, I think that takes away some of that physicality that Michigan would want to lean on with that running game. We know that they're going to want to shrink the game. Texas gets out early. I think that's where they'll be able to kind of rely on that early lead and run off clock, even with some injuries to that running back room at the moment.
Texas absolutely needs to get out to an early lead in that game. I will say this. Jim Harbaugh may be many things, but I think he knows what an offensive and defensive line are supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And so when y'all talk about physicality, that's really what I think of. I think they're going to be really good on both the offensive and defensive front, even though they are replacing all 5 starters on the offensive line. I think they're going to be plenty good on that side. He recruited well there. He develops well there. And he's not that far gone, right? He's only been gone for 6 months. As far as defensive line, of course, they have the 2 interior guys that are supposed to be first-round picks. They have some outside guys that people love. It's going to be a tough out for Texas in Ann Arbor. I agree with Gerry. I think they actually have more talent overall on defense right now than Alabama did a year ago. That's saying a lot when Alabama, Nick Saban got his guys on defense. All right. Before we get going, I want to ask you, Gerry and CJ, anything on recruiting right now that we're watching for? Gerry, you've been on the road, saw Bo Barnes, the linebacker at Skyline, Fasusi, lineman at Louisville, as well as Khalid Lockett, Javian Osborne, the young running back over at Forney. Your thoughts on anything going on in recruiting, or is this kind of the lull before the storm next week and a half?
Well, I think the interesting thing to me is there's some big national recruitments that Texas is still in on, and that these guys are making. It's national recruitments. I mean, from the teams that are in the picture. Michael Fasusi is Oklahoma, Texas, Texas A&M. So it's regional but national teams in recruiting. Jonah Williams, LSU, Texas, Texas A&M, Oregon. I mean, that's as big as it gets regionally and then nationally with Oregon. Nick Brooks is Georgia, Texas, USC. I mean, you keep going down that Madden Faramo, who will decide later, but Michael Terry, Texas, Nebraska, Oregon, and he's been to all 3 recently. Aiden Anning may be the one that's not as much of a national battle because I think Arkansas has done a good job there and LSU's late to the party. But there's some Jamie French, Texas, Miami, Tennessee, LSU on the peripheral. There's some big battles coming up and some big decisions coming up for Texas. And at some point, it's kind of a numbers game with me. You're not going to win them all. Nobody does. How many are you going to win? Which one of those is most important? I think you might come up with different answers on that. Some people might say Fasusi, 5-star left tackle. Some people may say Jamie French because it's a kid from Florida. Texas had a lead on. Jacksonville is not an area Texas has ever won a big recruiting battle in my years doing this, and he is a potential 5-star wide receiver. Some people would say Michael Terry. He's the guy that's an hour away from home and that is one of the best athletes in the country. And then some people might say Jonah Williams because he's Galveston Ball. He's a safety, Houston area. A&M's owned the Houston area in recent years. So you could go any different way with these guys. But the reality is Texas needs to win half of these, I think. Recruitment's headed into the season because that puts them, 19, 20 commitments by the time the first ball is kicked and ranked about 7 in the country in the recruiting rankings. So they need to win. They need to come up with half. They need to split these big decisions coming up some way.
All right. CJ, I wanted to ask you, this is a little side note almost. Texas bringing in, and this is way down the road, but worth a note, Texas bringing in a quarterback from California for the class of 2027. We know they've already got KJ Lacey committed this year, then Dia Bell next year, the son of Raja Bell, the former NBA player out of the Miami area. But now they're reaching out to a guy on the West Coast that's expected to visit sometime in October. Tell folks a little bit about him.
Yeah, Brady Edmonds, he 2027 quarterback out of Huntington Beach, California. He came in originally and earned his offer the June 1st elite camp. And some, folks that we talked to afterward actually said that might have been the most impressive arm on camp, even as a 2027. Of course, that's even when you had your 26 battle going on as well. So worth keeping an eye on him. He'll be coming in for the Georgia game October 19th. He's got a couple other games. I traded messages with him late last night. Nebraska at Ohio State earlier in the year. He's going to the Oregon at UCLA game and the Penn State at USC game. So again, West Coast guy checking out what was a lot of those former Pac-12 schools, but also coming out to Austin to get a look at the big Georgia game, hopefully under the lights to get that full experience, but also a guy in which I could certainly see sticking around for a day before or after to meet with Steve Sarkisian. Of course, it was very interesting to me, Bobby and Gerry, that Texas extended 2 offers that same day, June 1st, the other to Peyton Houston out of Shreveport, Louisiana. But to see Texas kind of act so quickly on the 2027 quarterback class when we had, several months this year determining whether or not they would extend any other offers to 2026, and then seeing them do so, and that quarterback jumped in the fold so early with Diabell, it makes me think that these 2 guys in 27 are going to be who you keep an eye on as quickly as possible moving forward. But Brady Edmonds coming in for the October 19th Georgia-Texas game at DKR. Really, really talented kid. He was at Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, USC, all the big programs out in the West Coast, and now the Big Ten earlier this, month of June.
All right. CJ, Gerry, thank y'all so much. I thought this is a good episode of Stay of the Program. I talked a little bit about the themes that we're noticing and really wanting to see clarified maybe. Obviously, the running back situation at Texas has to be figured out a little bit. They're adding new pieces of the puzzle. We've reported that here at On Texas Football as well. But good stories, good information as always from you two. And thank you for everyone for joining us. Thanks again to our sponsor. That is Adam Loewy of the Loewy Law Firm. Reach out to him and his firm if you've been injured in an automobile accident of any kind. They give you a no strings attached free consultation. See if you're due any compensation. Again, that's Adam at LoewyLawFirm.com. Appreciate you, Adam. All right, Gerry and CJ, any final comments y'all want to mention before we let folks go here today?
I'll be, by the time this comes out, I'll be down in San Antonio having a nice little update on a 5-star Michael Terry for you. So stay tuned on Texas Football, and we'll have that on the site as well as up here on the YouTube channel for On Texas Football as well.
All right, good stuff. All right, thanks so much, Gerry. Thanks, CJ. You guys are both on the road today, so I thank you for making the time.